this topic, resilience, it's a lovely topic actually, because most people like the idea of resilience. Most people feel they have it, and that it's important. If they don't have enough of it, they want more of it. So I think that's a really nice way to start. But can everyone see my slides? Just a quick thumbs up. Is that clear for everyone?
Yeah, that we can see them. Looks great.
Great. And yeah, like Jo said, please do ask questions as we go. Feel free to use the chat to interact. A couple of times I might ask a question. You don't have to, but I'd love to see your responses, because it's a really nice way of knowing that you're all actually out there, and that it may be resonating with you. But if you don't put something in the chat, that's fine, but do think about it yourself, because I think there are lots of ways that we can take some of this content for a bit of reflection, and this is a good time of year to do that. So we're going to have a look at what resilience is and why it's important, how to create and develop our own resilience. There's a particular tool which I use called the Resilience Wheel, which is quite a useful tool that you can use personally as you're evaluating your resilience, and also use it with team members or your coaching clients as well. And then finally, we're going to look at a few strategies for dealing with difficult situations, which I hope will be helpful. It's not exhaustive, but actually what I find is it's nice to have a list, because when you're stressed out or overwhelmed or tired, it can be really easy to forget that we've got all of these wonderful strategies, and just to have a place to go to remind yourself of those could be very helpful. So firstly, a little bit about me. Now, this is a slide I hadn't planned to do actually, but with a lot of the other wonderful coaches that have been part of this summit over the last couple of days, I've been really touched by some of the stories, and they've resonated with me. And when I thought, how shall I introduce myself? What I realized was the reason I'm talking about resilience today is a really big part of my own story. So I wanted to share a bit of that with you. I'm a solicitor, first and foremost. I qualified in 2011, and I've been practicing ever since. But about 5 years ago, I was sitting at my desk in an employed role at a private practice law firm, and something was missing. I didn't dislike what I did, but I wasn't thriving and I wasn't shining. And I felt there was just something more out there for me. So I was at that sort of juncture that a lot of us get to when you think, what's the next step? Am I moving forward for a promotion? Am I looking for the next step up? Is this the time to do something different if I want to? And around that time, I had some really amazing career coaching. It was the first time I'd had coaching. And I knew from that very first session that coaching was going to be part of my future, because sitting down, having a bit of space, being asked some questions, and really thinking about that was transformative. And a lot of people have said that about coaching. And that's why I think it's so important. So that's why I took a step towards coaching. And I didn't want to be full-time employed all the time, and also trying to run a coaching business very much on the side. So I decided to become a consultant solicitor, and I do that some of the time, and I balance that with my coaching business now. So over the last 4 years or so, I've studied for an ILM in executive coaching and mentoring, which I've loved, because that gives you a lot of the foundations for coaching. And as someone that has to be qualified for my legal role, I really wanted to be qualified as a coach as well. It's not essential, but it was really good for me to learn about tools and techniques and questioning styles that would really support and supplement my own coaching conversations. So that's really how I came to be here. But why resilience is a topic for me? When I was reflecting, as we so often do during our coaching learning, and I think honestly I learned more about myself than I'd ever known before as I became a coach, I started to think about what wasn't working for me at the law firm in the job that I'd done. And I realized that I felt capable as a lawyer. I felt competent to give advice on those documents that I was drafting, but it was just something was missing, and I wasn't feeling strong and I wasn't feeling resilient. But as I learnt about coaching, bearing in mind I was brand new to it, there was a very steep learning curve, and it takes time. It takes time to build a new skill set. And I didn't have any of the comfort and experience that I had in law. I'd never felt stronger, because I knew I was stepping into something that made me feel really good. And I decided to focus on that and work out what it was about it. And I realized that my routine had changed, my thought process had changed, my understanding and reflection process had changed. So whilst I was the same me, and still do the legal work, still enjoy doing that. It's the coaching side that's really changed how I provide both my legal and my coaching roles. And resilience is really, for me, it was the key, because a few years ago, I wasn't resilient, I wasn't thriving. And our lovely Casey, who was talking yesterday about mindset in the summit, she mentioned about the chimp paradox, which is a brilliant book. If you've not read it, yeah, I really recommend it. This idea that we've got three main parts to our brain. We've got our logical human side, the one that's talking now, the one that's capable of rational thinking and sensible decision making. We've got our computer that stores experiences and learning. And then we've got our passionate chimp. And the chimp is there for good reason. It's there to protect us, and there's some brilliant things it does for us. But it's also likely to fly off the handle if things get a bit tough. And 4.5, 5 years ago, my chimp was very much in charge. It was front and center, and it was making a lot of my decisions, not terribly well, I might add. And I needed to rein that back in and let the human get back in the driving seat. So when Casey spoke about that yesterday, and if you missed her summit, pick it up in the coaching lounge because it was brilliant. It really resonated and just made me think that that's why I'm talking about resilience today. So that's just a very little bit about that. But I'd like now to, before I jump in with my own thoughts on resilience and my research, I'd love you to have a think yourself about what resilience looks like to you. And feel free to put into the chat anything, any words or feelings or even images that it conjures up when you hear the term resilience. And I'm not terribly good at focusing on a chat whilst I've got slides up. So Jo, let me know if there's anything coming in there.
I will do. I'm just writing bouncy ball.
Bouncy ball.
And Nikki's followed up with bouncing back.
Interesting.
Anne-Marie says team support, not on your own. Mm-hmm. Debbie says bounce back. Susie says coping, bouncing back. Susie says strength and awareness.
Yeah. So there's quite a lot. There's some common threads, but then there's also some very individual styles about it. And I think that's what's important about resilience, because what is resilience to me is not necessarily the same as it is to everyone else. There is a definition which people grasp, but even the words within that definition do mean different things to different people. So no, that's great. And you know, if more comments come in, let me know.
Yep, we've got more coming in. So Julia says keeping the focus through change and hard times. Debbie said I get knocked down but I get up again. Casey says weathering the storm. Lucy, strength to endure. Susie, Teflon coating. Another Susie, conscious vulnerability. Beautiful. Alex says perseverance and mindset. Sally says, I love the visual image of flexible bamboo, if I've remembered the right bit of greenery.
Yeah, I think you have. It grows quite quickly as well, which is good. Takes a while to get going and then it grows fast. I quite like that.
Yeah.
No, that's really good. And actually, I think what I like is that everyone's got their personal flavour of it. And like I said, whilst there is there are definitions of resilience and what it is, everyone takes from that what they like. And actually, I love the bouncing ball and the bounce back. And in fact, one of the things I talk about is not just bouncing back, but bouncing forward. And that's really applicable with the bouncy ball, particularly because it can go off in any direction, certainly when I talk about that. Okay, well, thank you all. I really appreciate that. And as things come to you, feel free to keep sharing them. But in terms of what resilience is, I've done a lot of research into it, and there are hundreds of definitions if you Google what resilience is. But this is probably my favourite, and I think perhaps the most accurate way of describing it. It's a person's ability to take on pressure in a positive way and to recover from adversity. So actually, a lot of the points people were putting in the chat focus on those issues. And it's the ability to cope with life's challenges as they come along and perhaps become stronger as a result of having dealt with them. Not just to bounce back, but bounce forward. So resilience, I mean, I think it helps for many reasons, and we'll talk about why it's important in a second, but potentially over the last 18 months, 2 years, all of us have had to develop resilience, and we haven't really thought, oh, we are developing resilience now, that's what we're doing. We've just been adapting. We've been coping with change. We've been thinking about what we need to do to be able to cope with the restrictions, to manage our time, to work from home effectively. If we've got businesses, to pivot perhaps how we provide those services so that we can still meet customer demand. That's all really, really crucial. And that's happened quite quickly. And if most people think about innovation as a process, it can take a long time. It can take a long time to think about which way you want to go with business. It can take time to cost it, to trial it, eventually to roll it out. But certainly during lockdown 1 last year, if you cast your minds back to that horrendous time, a lot of stuff happened really quickly. Almost the entire office-based workforce started working from home in a matter of days and weeks. Companies were thinking, or businesses were thinking, if we can't see our customers in person, how can we still keep in touch with them? And there were some fantastic examples of ways to do that, ways to innovate. And it's those individuals that were flexible and those companies that were adaptable that are resilient. And they're demonstrating their resilience, and they're probably stronger now as a result of having employed that quickly when needed because of an external factor that came along, some adversity as it came along. So the good news is with resilience is that we all have it. We're born with some inherent resilience, which I like. And I always go back to that. If I'm ever feeling a little bit less resilient, I go back to, well, I've got some because I'm alive and I'm a human being. So naturally I've got some. But then there's also the developed resilience we work out through life as we're coping with change, as we're dealing with issues and challenges. Our computer in our mind stores all of that, and we learn from it, and then we learn to deploy it next time we need it. So drawing on that resilience during stressful times is what it's all about. And then we can develop mechanisms to increase that. And that's what we're going to look at in a little bit. But first, I'd like to look at why resilience is important. And again, feel free, if you've got some thoughts on this, please drop it into the chat, because there isn't just a short list of 5 points that I put on the screen. These are some things that I've taken from my coaching conversations over the past 18 months particularly, but have a think about as well for you why resilience is so important. And I'll run through these points, which I think cover quite a lot of them, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. So helping you to take things in your stride, that's a really big thing, because it's very easy to go to pieces when things go wrong. And if you're feeling, if it's unplanned and you're feeling weakened by it, or that it's a big change that you weren't expecting, it can be really quite damaging. So having that baseline of resilience means we can take things in our stride better and keep going when things get tough. It also increases our chance of success during those challenging times. And I think for the most part, it enables us to see things more positively. Another point Casey made yesterday in her talk about mindset is that we are predisposed to see the dangers and the risks, which is a more negative side. And that's part of our coping mechanism and our survival mechanism. However, we can train ourselves to be more positive and to think optimistically about possibilities and options if we're resilient. It's desirable. It's a nice trait if you have a partner or colleagues or people in your team, people you respect and admire. Quite often resilience is one of those lovely traits we'll say is a good thing about someone. Nobody ever says, oh, they're terribly resilient, isn't that awful? So it's a good thing to have and to develop. And it's associated with a healthier life. And I mean that physiologically, because having a lot of stress, which is often when people don't feel resilient, they're coping with stress poorly, they're not taking it on in a positive way, that can have massive implications on physical and mental health. It's linked to having a resilient mindset is linked to longevity and lower chances of depression, which is really, really important. So, having that healthy life physically and mentally, because you're resilient, is crucial, which is why I think it's so important to work on resilience. Is there anything in the chat that I need to see, Jo? I'm just aware I could
people might be add some thoughts to the chat, if you've got thoughts about the reasons it's important. I wrote in the chat, I think it's also important to think about resilience in your coaching business model.
Definitely. Because as well, there's a lot that changes really quickly, and also often people have come at coaching from a very different angle. They've been in HR, they've had a different career altogether, and often when you're employed, you've got a lot of other structures in place, and if you're coaching in business, particularly by yourself, you need to allow for that resilience to grow as a business as well as an individual.
Yeah, I think the more you can think about multiple income streams, maybe a range of passive income streams, as well as where you're delivering in person or one-to-one, as well as group coaching, so that if there is some variance in the market or your ideal clients or the wider world, you can have confidence. Because if you're in a workplace and you're only working on one project and that project gets pulled, then we know that your role might be made redundant. So it's thinking about applying those similar approaches as you design your coaching business?
Yeah, absolutely. And it also goes further into making sure you've got support structures in place for your coaching business so that you're not overwhelmed and doing it all by yourself at the same time. And that's crucial. I'm sure we'll pick up on that later. So this next slide is also, again, a few things I've put down because I come across this regularly, but you'll have your own ways of building your own personal resilience. So whilst you're under no obligation to share, if you have some good ideas that you think might help others and that have helped you, please do. I mean, I think the items on the slide are probably quite universally accepted as ways for us to keep on top of our mental and physical health, and also how to deal with things when they get a bit tough. So have a look at that list and see what resonates with you. Is it about relaxation and mindfulness? Is it more about exercise, nutrition, diet? Is it morning routines and organization? And actually, I find at different points in my life, different parts of this have become more relevant. And a few of you on the call know me and know that I have an exuberant Labrador puppy called Artemis, or Missy for short. And I go walking with her every morning. And that morning walk is crucial for my day. I do it first thing in the morning before I check work emails, before I'm bombarded with other people's ideas or social media or anything else. And it gives me a bit of space, bit of interest and excitement, because Missy's terribly excited as soon as we go out for a walk. And it's enthusiastic watching that. And it gives me a bit of creativity, which is often for me the first thing that goes when I get busy. I stop having exciting dreams and thinking about random goals. I do that in the morning because I haven't got busy yet and my brain's got this time to be creative, which I really love. So that's part of my morning routine. It's also part of my exercise routine. And if I don't get it, it does have an impact. And I noticed a few times, for whatever reason, I couldn't get out for a walk and I just carried on with my day and things didn't go well. I was more irritable. I was a bit quicker to make decisions, and I was perhaps a bit more irrational than I would normally be. So I had to develop other scenarios where if walking wasn't an option, what else could I do? And now I employ a bit of stretching or yoga, some meditation. And if I can't walk for some reason, I've got other options. But it took me a while to realize that that was all part of Vicki bringing her best self every day. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. If there's anything in the chat, Jo, please.
Yeah. Emma said her Peloton, which she absolutely loves. It allows her to reset and doesn't take as much time out of the day as the gym, but the outcome is good. Julia says at the moment, hot yoga and morning routine, reading, learning, building a business. Anne-Marie says swimming and reflection for me. Emma also says a big thing for me is staying connected to people outside of my work. Debbie is a wild swimmer, so that really helps her. I was thinking for me, it's like having boundaries, but also having flexibility, that balance between the two, and connecting to my choices, because sometimes it can be easy for us to forget that we have choices. We can feel that things aren't within our control, and being listened to unconditionally can be really releasing. Alex is saying just disconnecting from digital really works for me. The constant pinging of technology does distract me from the need for space and breathing. Absolutely. Sally says for me it's being outdoors, likewise walking the dog, but if I can't do that for whatever reason, just sitting out in the garden. And Stacey says relaxation and meditation. I think it's meditation for me, removing myself for a few minutes to reset.
That's really important. And actually, I find that whilst I don't practice meditation and mindfulness every day, it's on my goals list, but I do it in between things. So actually, if I've had a busy morning of legal work and I know I've got coaching conversations in the afternoon, I take that time out to meditate and be mindful and reset, because what's needed as Vicki the lawyer, which is the advice giver and the problem solver in that way, is very different to Vicki the coach. So I've actually used that as a really good way of pivoting between my two roles. But no, I like that, and I love the connecting to people outside of work, and also Jo, what you said about having both flexibility and being able to sort of choose where and when you work, which is lovely. And that's something I really enjoy about my life now, because I think I'd really struggle. I'm probably unemployable now. I don't think I could sit at a desk between 9 and 5 every single day for somebody else now. And that's only because I've given myself this flexibility, and I love it. I took my mum shopping to Stamford last week, just one day, because I felt like it. And I was able to work in the evening when I got home. The next day was a bit busier, but I can schedule that a lot better now for myself. And that's done a huge amount to help my resilience for me. Other people really like the organisation and the structure of employment. So I can see both sides to that. Brilliant. Well, thank you all for sharing. But I think what it comes down to for me is that building your own personal resilience is your own journey. And it's a bit like when on aeroplanes they say to fit your own oxygen mask before helping others. If you're not feeling strong in the first place, it's going to be very difficult to bring your best to work, for your family, to do everything you need to do. So doing that first for you, it's not selfish, it's essential. And if you're not already doing it and doing it well, I'd have a look at this and think about what you'd really love to feel as best as you can every day. Yes, my resilience wheel. So this is actually from one of my coaching textbooks, which I use for the ILM. It's here. It's a very exciting book called, I'm sure Joe will have seen this many times, Techniques for Coaching and Mentoring. And this is credited to Paula King. And the idea is it's a little bit like the Wheel of Life, if anyone's come across that. So there are different sections which you can score yourself on. So if you took, for example, perseverance, you can score yourself between 1 and 10, 1 being low and 10 being high, as to where you think you are on that segment. And you can do the same for all the others. And the benefit of breaking resilience down, these are some of the qualities most associated with resilience. So if you can break it down, you can figure out, if you're not feeling particularly resilient, pinpoint where that actually stems from. And I think that's quite valuable. So sometimes for me, I haven't been terribly high on my perseverance score, but I've been very high on my compassion score. Even my humour, my honesty has been quite high. But then it helped me isolate where I was feeling less resilient, and then I could work on that area. So it's just an idea for those of you that are either coaching with people, or you have teams that you're in charge of and you're helping people try and get the best out of themselves. You can use this with them, along with just more questions and making sure people are taking time to build their own personal resilience. And I do revisit this occasionally myself. So let me know if you think that's useful. But I found it was probably more for me, a bit more directive than general reflection. And it really did help me to actually identify where there were certain issues. So finally, strategies for dealing with difficult situations. Now, this idea came from my dad, and I'm going to credit him. So my dad, Freddie, was a company director for many, many years, but he was also a motivational speaker. And this was back in the days, you know, he's quite old now. So back in the days when Zig Ziglar was a big motivational speaker, Dad shared a stage with him and some other wonderful people as well. So he was always a good person to do keynote speaks at our conferences. And I remember about 7 years ago, he was giving this talk, and he said people had been coming to him with these difficult situations, these challenges, and they were feeling overwhelmed. So he put together a list of how he deals with difficult situations. And this is not entirely his list. If he saw this, he'd be very cross, because there are a couple of things I've taken out and put my own things in instead. But what people liked about it, and a lot of people I heard going up to him afterwards and talking about it, said, it's really nice just to have a list all in one place. I've put it in my phone as a note, or I've written it in the back of my diary. And it just means that when things go to pot, or when things go wrong, I can have a look at this list, and it might just give me some of the tools I need to change my mindset, to become more positive, and to think about things in a different way. So I'll run through each of them, but again, this is by no means exhaustive, and if you've got others, please do drop them in. Acceptance. I think this is probably the hardest one for me, which is why I've put it at the top. Accepting bad things happen, sometimes with which I have no control over at all, did not sit well with me. I liked knowing what I was doing and that nothing would go wrong. But you know, no one could have planned COVID being a global pandemic and the effects that would have. But I can't do anything about it. I can't change the weather if it's raining and I'm going on a dog walk. But what I can control, what's in my sphere of influence, is using the right clothes when I go on the dog walk, making sure I've got a waterproof jacket on, making sure I'm not wearing flip-flops. You know, there are things I can control and things I can't. So accepting that and probably making peace with it was a big step for me. Thinking about what you need for your own resilience. So that's the last two slides. What really makes you tick, and probably you're already aware of it. Nothing's groundbreaking or new there, but it might be a while since you've revisited it, since you've looked at it or thought about it. And as well with that, it's not just doing it once and then that's your resilience plan forever. Because a few years ago, before I had a dog, I didn't walk every day and I was fine. I did different things. I did different exercise sessions, or I did meditate more regularly than I did yoga. So things do change throughout. And it's, things like podcasts have been relatively recent, that people have been listening to podcasts as a way of really calming down. And there's so much choice now, including Joe and Zoe's. They haven't asked me to, but it's a shameless plug for them because it's fantastic. So, think about what you need for resilience, but also keep checking in on that, because things change. Maintaining perspective. Again, this goes back to being very easy to get overwhelmed and go to pieces if things go wrong. However, maintaining that perspective, particularly looking at what the long-term effect of something will be, is quite helpful. And it's not always easy to know the long-term effect, but if we can look at that and say, okay, so this feels really big today, right now, this minute, but what's it going to be like in a month or 6 months or 2 years? And the bigger we make that field, the less the problem is so much of a problem. And I think that's really important to put things into perspective, because I remember years ago I read a book, I think it was The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod, and he was talking about, if it's not going to matter in 5 years, don't spend more than 5 minutes talking about it. And I've heard that from other people as well. And it's really big when something happens and it's front and center, really easy to get overwhelmed with it. But spread it out, see the long-term impact, and think about what else you've got around you at the moment that's good. And that can really help to dial down how impactful that will be. Adopting the right mindset. And this is something that my dad was really, really big on when he was a motivational speaker, because he felt that mindset was everything. And I think that's probably one of the reasons I'm so interested in mindset anyway, which also led me in my coaching journey. But having that mindset that's focused on growth, possibility, positivity, it's not always easy, but if you can get that there and you can work on it, it will help you do so much easier. And a good question to ask yourself, and this is something I do for myself sometimes when I'm looking at the mindset, is I'll sometimes say, what would my ideal self respond? How would my ideal self respond to this particular challenge? Because I can think of how Vicki at this moment would respond, but how would calm, rational, logical, intelligent, how would she respond to it all? And that can be quite helpful. It's also quite a helpful coaching question if you want to use that. Humour. Again, this is my dad's, and I initially didn't like it because I don't think we can laugh away really bad things that happen. But his view was that laughter is a really good medicine. Sometimes I say it's the best medicine. And if you can find someone to laugh with during a difficult time, or something to laugh at, whether it's a funny program, it actually causes chemical changes in the brain. It releases endorphins and dopamine, and it's a feel-good chemical. So if you can, whilst it might be very difficult and not applicable and appropriate for every situation, if there are difficult, challenging times, try and find something funny, because it will help, and it's a healthy way of building resilience, rather than going to the gin cupboard and finding the strongest one you have, which is a less healthy way of coping. Again, perfectly valid in some situations. Find ways that are really healthy and that you probably can do wherever you are, with just a little bit of thought. And support structures. This is really big, certainly since I've been working for myself. So I've worked alone for 3.5 years, and I actually really like it now. But there were definitely times in that first 6 months that I thought I'd come from this office of 500 plus people, and I was sitting by myself in my kitchen at a fairly cold table because I hadn't reset the heating to actually be on during the day, and I felt miserable. And a lot of it was just not being surrounded by any kind of support. I felt totally isolated, and I think that's quite common for coaches who run their own practice and that don't have any support structure. So think about who is out there that can help you and use them. Really, really crucial, not just in terms of emotional support and friends. Having resilience buddies is a great idea, by the way, but also think about how someone could support you in other ways, how you might be able to delegate some of the work that's stressing you out or driving you mad, or that you're not good at. So actually Jo mentioned this in her talk with Zoe last night about what they outsourced early on, for example, bookkeeping. I'm terrible at it. I've got someone to help me with that, and it's brilliant having that support. But I wish there were other things I'd done sooner in terms of delegation, because whilst it's a step and it's a bit of releasing control and it's possibly costly, that takes away a lot of immediate stress from you. So you can help focus on what makes you resilient rather than what's causing that resilience to be etched away. And whilst this is probably preaching to the choir, I'd say consider coaching and mentoring and training and learning, purely because a lot of people don't think about that early on. And it's one of those things. I was talking to a coach the other day. He said, oh, I'm really happy I've now got a coach. And I thought, oh, haven't you always had a coach? Because that's one of the best things about being a coach, is knowing how good coaching can be and having that. But she just said no, she'd finished a contract, she hadn't thought of it, and it'd been 6 months and no one was helping her to challenge those unhelpful thought processes. So I'd say coaching and mentoring is always a definite strategy for dealing with difficult situations. Reach out to those people at that time. And in summary, just before as I move on to the next slide, this is a lovely quote that I saw and it really resonated with me. It's our reaction to adversity, not the adversity itself, that determines how our life story will develop. I really liked that. And it got me thinking about just a handful, and there are so many more examples, but a handful of celebrities and famous people who had a lot of adversity in their early life. You know, Walt Disney was apparently fired for not being creative enough. J.K. Rowling and Stephen King were both told several times by publishers. I think Stephen King was refused 30 times before his first book was published. And now he sold something like 350 million copies. Thomas Edison is quoted to have said that he hasn't failed, he's just found 10,000 ways something didn't work. So the idea that he's probably, maybe not 10,000, but he could well have tried a huge amount before he created the light bulb. I think there are so many stories like that of people that we know and respect because they've done it, but they had adversity along the way. Adversity is a part of life and it's usually, hopefully, temporary, and we can figure out how best to deal with it so that we can move forward. But I love that last quote. I hope you do too, and I hope you've enjoyed the talk. I'm aware that it's lunchtime and I don't want to take away the last 20 minutes that you might need to go and get a sandwich or whatever, but please feel free to ask any questions. Joe, I'll also leave up some contact details at the end because there might not be time for everyone, but feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or Facebook. And I also have a Facebook group which is dedicated to professionals like me who wanted to live their careers a little bit differently. So feel free to get in touch and let me know if there are any questions.